Hi, good afternoon, all of you. Thank you for joining me. And this is Sourabh from UEI Global Lucknow. I'm a Deputy Director with this organization. And let me thank ACS, let me thank UEI Global for this wonderful opportunity that I have today to present on glassware. Now, glassware has been a very fascinating topic for me for many years. I am a hospitality professional and a passionate bartender, definitely a foodie, an avid reader, love to travel, and have been into this trade of hospitality for many years. Today, this session with me will definitely take you across many boundaries, many seas, many years, and we'll share a lot of nostalgia, definitely a lot of trivia, and we will also talk about the usages and the etymology and history of the most proficient glassware that are being used in this industry these days. Um, I have been very fascinated with the glass itself. When we talk about the glass, I mean not only the glassware but the glass as the element itself. It has been very fascinating since my childhood, and I'm sure many of you also have been very fascinated with the colorful glasses and the usage of the glasses. Now I got surprised and also got a little shocked, and also at times got bewildered of the fact that this was made of sand. Glasses are made out of sand. Well, that is what struck me. I was astonished when my teacher once told me in school that you know what glasses are made of? They are made out of sand. I couldn't believe the fact. It wasn't. And that was no time, that was an era where we only had books in the encyclopedias in the library. There was no Google. So I relied on people, asked my dad, asked many people who I thought, and everybody said, it's made out of sand. You believe? Very unbelievable. But let's start the story of how glass came into being. Many years back, we were going through the copper age. Copper has been discovered 10,000 years from now. And many years from now, about 3,500 years before Christ, so that would be around some 5,500 from years from now, then the Mesopotamians and also the Egyptians and also the Sumerians claimed that they had discovered a wonderful element which is called the glass. Now, glass was also found in Syria, naturally at some places, but the people of Mesopotamia, especially people around the place now, Iran and Iraq and the central of the Middle Eastern countries, found out that if you have enough heat to melt sand, you can liquefy it and form it into different shapes. So that was the beginning. But slowly God got evolved and took into many shapes and sizes and many usages. So what? It's a very simple formula. When we did this, when I studied chemistry in my school days, I could relate now that silicon is such a wonderful element that it is. With oxygen becomes silica. And the silica is readily available in many varieties of sand. And this sand, if you can heat it to a temperature of about 1600 degrees centigrade, you know what? It liquefies and then you can actually give it a shape. And when it solidifies, it comes out brilliant, something like this. These are ashtrays now made out of solid glass. And if you could add a little bit of a soda ash, which is sodium carbonate, and if you could add a little bit of a limestone, which is calcium carbonate, you can still bring down the temperature to a much manageable level, and you can create wonderful apparatuses, equipments, and definitely not of glassware. So those were the days when people were still struggling to live a happy life. Happiness was there in very small things. Copper age turning into bronze age, and people have known that copper could be converted into a wonderful element called bronze by adding tin, and that was the time when glass came into being. Now, glasses were being made in the most authentic or the most stubborn forms. I would say stubborn because they were poured into rocks and they took the shape of the rocks, and then it will solidify, and something that would come out would be of this shape. This was the shape which predominantly came from the rocks which were cut into this shape, and liquefied glasses be poured into rocks, which would solidify and become something like this, which we call the rock glass. So that's the beginning of this glass story. So this is quite a big size. We still call it the rock glass, and now it has predominantly been used for unique purposes. Rock glasses, as the name is called, is used primarily for drinking whiskey, and that too Scotch. The Scottish were the ones who started making whiskey. These glasses came into these shapes from about 2000 years from now, but slowly the glasses started taking different shapes. The first and foremost shape was the rock glass, which is also now called the old-fashioned glass. The old-fashioned glass because this was the first kind of glass shape that came into being and had been used primarily by the Scottish and the Gaelic people for sipping whiskey, not drinking, for sipping whiskey. So what happens is, when you put in a bit of a whiskey over here and you start drinking, and I will show you how. I poured some whiskey over here, definitely some mock whiskey. And I hold it nicely with the warmth of my hand and my palms surrounded it. The volatile elements of the whiskey gets vaporized and I can sip it like this. And my whole nose goes inside. If you see from sideways, the whole aroma comes into my nose. So there is hardly anything that is missing, and I have wonderful sips, and that's how the old-fashioned glass came into being also called the whiskey glass. Also called the whiskey glass. Now, as we progressed, the year was about 300 years from now, and there were only horse carriages, people driven, and slowly we came into the time when locomotives came into being. Locomotives, engines. Which engines? Steam engines. And they started moving the rail. The railroad came into being. The whole of US network, the whole of Europe was stretched with railway tracks. And as you all know, the new things only go to the privileged. Only the privileged would get a chance to ride the locomotives. And the privileged also had the fashion and the little passion for drinking a little bit of a Scotch, a little bit of a whiskey. But these glasses, as you see, would be otherwise very stable, but a locomotive which was very jerky in those times would wobble, and they would not hold the whiskey very lightly. So they wanted something to be steady and strong so that it could hold their whiskey strongly. So this old-fashioned glass gave way to the more sturdier, narrower, the highball glass. Now this word highball has become one of the most popular names across the hospitality industry. This is the most simplistic shape that one could think about. It holds about 10 to 12 ounces, which is a good amount of liquid to quench somebody's thirst. And it happens to be the replacement for the old-fashioned glass when it came to locomotives. So think about those times that a cargo or a caravan or a carriage full of some noblemen sitting together in the evening waiting for their scotches to be poured into glasses, and a glass which could be sturdy and held nicely, and it wouldn't wobble off the table, and it wouldn't spill the liquid out of its glasses. So they created a little narrower glass, a little more steadier glass, and a good drink. So the word highball, why would anybody call it a highball glass? So how does it relate to highball? Now the story goes that when the locomotive started in Europe and later in US, these were running at a very low speed on tracks which were not done on good suspension. Today, our tracks are well suspended on springs, our railway carriages are smooth and fantastic, and we have a very smooth ride. But back 200 years from now, you can think how wobbly the train would be. But the best part was, when the train would take up speed, there would be enough coal in the engine, and it will be blasting a lot of steam. The train would chuck at a very fast speed. The faster the speed, you know what will happen? The stable becomes the carriage. The carriage becomes stable and the tables become much more stable. The wobbleness will go down. But how would anybody know what's the speed like? So those days they used to have barometers, and a barometer had a small ball on the top. So when the barometer will a lot of pressure, the barometer ball will go up at a very high level. So people knew that the ball was at a high level. So that is how the ball is high, the speed is high. So here comes our high ball glass. Time for the evening sip, but time for the scotch sip in this high ball glasses, because they would hold enough amount of liquid which will not spill. So if you had the same little whiskey which I had poured out earlier into the old-fashioned glass, this whiskey will still hold in a wonderful 2 ounces without, even if it wobble, it won't spill out, and that's how the name came highball. The highball name came very well into the normal parlance. But that was a time when ballrooms were also created. Ballrooms were enormous big spaces, huge spaces, which were given by the kingsmen, the noble, for the ballrooms to happen, for the events to happen. And what was a ballroom event? A ballroom event, it was a social gathering where people will come together for a dance or a felicitation, along with merrymaking and lot of drinking. So these old-fashioned glasses, which were always used because whiskey was always in popularity. So this was a little difficult to take and move around the hall, and sometimes to do a little bit of a waltz. So if you had to do a little bit of a waltz, and if you have to move into the hall, this old-fashioned glass became a difficulty. So they brought in the nice and strong, and the firmer and the slender, highball which they could hold on, move around, and even shake a few legs here and there without any spillage. So they came the highball. With the ballroom, the high tall glasses, it named the highball. But somebody had another story. Now, what was the story like? The story says, oh my God, whiskey was just not drunk neat anymore. Whiskey was being added with little bit of water. Whiskey was being added with little bit of ice. So when they added the ice, they called it the rocks. So when they splashed the whiskey on the ice, they called it on the rocks. So what is the glass? The rock glass. And when it came to a mixer, maybe whiskey with a little bit of water, the cocktail was named as whiskey water. The same whiskey and a little bit of a water. That became the first cocktail of their times. A whiskey and a water. First cocktail of mankind maybe. The whiskey, water, the highball. And that's how it became. So these stories were evolving around the same time, about centuries from now. And the popularity of this glass became so much that the whole world accepted it. Though it started from the European circles and going to US, but the popularity of the glasses was so worldwide that not only the glass itself, the name itself to a time where they started naming the same glass to call a low ball glass. Because they had named the other slender glass as a high ball glass, where it is now. Because they had named the slender glass the high ball, the rock glass or the old-fashioned glass became the low ball glass. So just to make contradiction, the glasses names were given a different perception. When all this was happening, the bartending business was going up. People were making their inside into pubs, into bars of those types. They used to call that tavern. 150, 200 years from now, people used to visit the taverns. And taverns were being the place where they had types of gossip, all types of discussion around the drinks, and majority of the drinks and the discussion used to happen. This was the most, and still happens to be, one of the most, I would say, popular places for having a drink and a discussion. One of those bartenders of those times in England, John Collins, was a person. He had knowledge about politics, he had knowledge about science and arts and many things. And he was one of those bartenders who would pull crowd on his own thing. So whatever John used to create, they used to be very happy. So John created something for the lovely ladies, because the ladies were the ones who were still not coming to the bar, because it was at that time to have the ladies at the bar. To pull the ladies, he started creating drinks from gin. Gin wasn't very popular in the bars by then. But England, the father place or the motherhood or the motherland of gin, is one place where gin was appreciated the most. From polo clubs to croquet clubs, ladies used to drink gin tonic even in the night. Though it was told that gin tonic would eradicate malaria or would become a prevention from malaria, so it became a habit for the English women to drink a little bit of a gin with tonic. That was the time when John Collins created a wonderful cocktail, very refreshing, from a variety of called the Old Town Gin. Old Town Gin and bathtub gins and London Dry gins are variants of gin which was being created in UK. In fact, majority of the gin was being created in England. Bathtub gin, bootleggers gin, and Old Town gin and London Dry gin are some of those old gins which are still very, very popular in the bazaar. Talking about Old Town gin, one of the fascinating gins of those Old Town gin was the main ingredient of the cocktail which John Collins made in this glass, which was little wider and a little taller than the highball glass. And if you see the highball glass, I'll take one from the shelf over here. It's slightly wider, slightly taller, and definitely holds a little more of liquid, about 12 to 14 ounces. What he created was a very refreshing cocktail, and still one of the best is the John Collins. And John Collins, little bit of a gin, a little lime, sugar syrup, topped with lemonade, with a mint leaf and a lime slice, and something which you could pass. It became the hit. So from John Collins, the cocktail became Tom Collins. Why? Because Old Town Gin was being used in John Collins cocktail, so the cocktail made a mix of two names, so it became the Tom Collins. So today you know the cocktail Tom Collins, and they named the glass Tom Collins. So this is a Tom Collins glass used for making the Collins cocktail, which is a very refreshing cocktail made out of gin, lemonade, a little bit of sugar syrup and lemon juice. So these were the glasses which did not have a stem. If you see these three glasses, they only have a base, a body, a neck, and a rim. So that's how you describe a glass. The bottom is the base, so three fingers coming to play, which you hold very elegantly. You hold your glass like this with these three fingers. At the base of the glass, this is the body of the glass, where you will try not to touch it because it will leave an impression on the glass. You will try and hold it from the base. The neck of the glass is usually kept clean. The drinks are poured only to the beginning of the neck, and the rim of the glass is the part that your lip should touch. These glasses, they do not have a stem, unlike these three set of glasses which all have a stem. Now why this stem? Why do they create a stem? Because making of glass was not very easy. Glass was still being made in molds. The blowing of the glasses have just come into being, and blowing a hot molten liquid to form a wonderful shape was very intensive, very, very difficult. But they created it. Why it was created? Why did we create a STEM class? Did we ever think about it? Let's take a second's break. Why did we create a STEM class? The STEM class goes the story before Christianity. Long before Christianity, God had been offered wine as a sacrament, as a sanctuary. Wine has been offered to God by the Romans. So if you go by the Roman mythology, we had gods for every little thing. So we had gods to be pleased, and they were offered wines. Later, when Christianity came into being, even in churches, wine was offered and used as a very drink and a very pure drink, especially the red wine. And if you go by the Christian era, you will see a lot of red wine being used to not only purify but as an offering to the beloved. So, for something to the beloved Lord, people felt that you should not touch it. You should not touch the wine. It is literally not touching the wine, but it is holding the wine. But they felt that our fingers were touching the wine, and it was making it little, if not impure, but not very sanctified. Maybe warming the wine, or maybe our sins were to it, or whatever they would think at that time. We have not much of an idea, but yes, just to keep the wine clean, they created the chalice. Now, what is a chalice? A chalice is a metallic utensil, quite like the shape of the wine glass, and it has been in existence for about what? For about 3,000 years from now, about 2,000 years before Christ. It has been there. The chalice was made out of copper initially, because that was the element that we knew at that time. We later made it bronze during the Bronze era, about 1,600 years before Christ. And later maybe of some other material by adding tin to it, we created bronze, and maybe in the Iron era we made it of iron also. But the shape was quite like this, because metals could be made into various shapes, and creating a metal stem was much easier than creating a glass stem. But that was how the shape came into being. As an offering to our beloved God, keep it pure, we created something in which we would literally not touch the wine, but to offer the wine to our most beloved, the God the Almighty. So we are literally not touching the wine, and that's how the shape. Now when the shapes came into being, this was primarily, if you see, for different kind of wine. So wine, again, as I said, is nectar of grapes. It is one of the most, I would say medicinal, one of the most purest form of alcoholic drinks that has been made in the whole of the world. And the area which is Europe now, and also part of Middle East, where we have a lot of grapes, wine became a unique beverage. Wine has been made and being served by a variety of people, by a variety of people all across the world. But they decided that wine should be served in a particular manner. It was decided. Now, since it predominantly comes from Europe, so the red wine is usually served at the room temperature. Red wine is a little more boisterous. It has got more stronger flavors. The aroma comes out a little later than the more volatile white wines. White wines, on the contrary, were served in little smaller glasses because they were served chilled. Where the European room vary between 12 to 14 degrees, or maybe about a little more than 18 degrees, the chilled temperatures were about 7 degrees in centigrade. So the red wines, since they needed a little more space, a little more of time, so that it could breathe and give out the aroma, a bigger glass was here for red wines. So red wines were poured to about half of the glass. or half of the glass, and was left on table to breathe. So when you hold a glass, you hold it again by the three fingers, the index, the long finger and the thumb. You hold the glass by the bottom and it should breathe. If you see all these glasses, the red wines and the white wines, they converge at the top. They converge at the top so that you can get the aroma right into the nostrils. If I show you from a profile of mine, you can see my nose going inside the glass when I take a sip. See, my nose goes inside. And all the nostril can take in the beautiful aroma that the white wines leave or the red wines give when you sip it from them. So the red wines and the white wines started to be served in stemmed glasses. Now, since these wines are also called table wines, so they are served on the table along with the meal. So they are served on the table along with the meal. And on the table, you will see that there is a kind of neatness which has to prevail throughout. That neatness has to prevail throughout. So if I put a white wine glass and a red wine glass, what will happen is every time the diner has to pick, like we become a diner for a while, if I have to pick the glasses, I pick it from the stem and I drink it from here and I keep it here. Had it not been a stem, I would have held the glass by the body, and every time I would have held the body, I would have left an impression. And if you feel that if I was eating bread and butter and maybe a little bit of a saucy food over here, I would be messing my fingertips as well. So with the messy fingertip, I might not use this napkin, or even if I use this napkin, my tips still remain a little soiled. Had it not been the stem, I would have held it by the glass. I would have been held it by the body. So every time I would hold it, maybe 20 times in the whole dining session, I would be leaving an impression which will not leave a very noble atmosphere on the table. So table wines were served in stemmed wines. If you see, water was never served in a meal initially. Water was never served in a meal initially till the time wines served on table, they created the goblet. They created the goblet. So the goblet also now has a stem which makes it match with the wine glasses. So you can keep the wine glasses all together here so that they match and make a pairing, and also for the fact that it takes less of space on the table. It gives us more space to work, more space to keep your cutlery, more space to work out here and there if you had a stemmed glass. Otherwise, if you had more than 2 glasses on the table, the glass all occupy more space. So that's the story about the stemmed glasses. If you have any questions, please throw them now, and I'll be very happy with when I get there. Let me move on to the next one.
I have a champagne sauce.
Yes. After table wines, one of the most liked wines is champagne. Champagne is something which become a celebrity wine, maybe a wine for the dinners or a wine for an occasion. So champagne got a new shape because those were table wines. They did not have, or they do not have, any bubbles into that. It is more watery, it is more flatter, more stable, whereas the champagne, so would come from the bottom and rise on top. Now, this is always you have seen when you have poured in champagne, or for that matter any aerated water, any aerated drink, the bubbles will rise from the bottom and to the top. And you know why? Because the pressure of the water of the liquid is most at the bottom. The pressure is least. So the bubbles tend to rise from here and evaporate and mix into the atmosphere. So that's why they created this narrow class so that they could retain the maximum carbon dioxide in these glasses, so that the effervescence or the aerated can remain in the wine for long. And if these glasses were flatter glasses like this, maybe wider, since the base is wide, the bubbles will start moving out from all the sides. Quickly, the wine will become flat. So, these glasses were not used. They replaced with the stemmed glasses because champagne is served chilled. So, your warmth of the hand will not heat up the wine. And since it's a narrow glass, majority of the carbon dioxide bubbles will remain in the glass for more time and have less place to escape and will be much more happier and merrier for a more long time. So these champagne tulips, because they're called tulips because they're shaped like tulip glasses, and they also found a place on the table. So the champagne glasses could be moved here or could be kept here, and that's the way you design and place your glasses on the table. So red wine, white wine, and the champagne. Let's move on to one of the most popular drinks of our times and from many ages, the old beer. Beer is in fact the most popular drink in the world, and the gallons of beer that has been drunk by people all across the world is so high that I'm sure it's going to beat water one day. Let's see. Beer started many years back, maybe about 3,000 years from now, or maybe about a little more, that beer has been made, though it has come to know that the Sumerians, later the Mesopotamians, about 5,000 years before Christ, have known the formula of beer, and they have been drinking beer from their bowls. From the bowls in which they would keep their barley, they would drink their fermented drink from the same bowl. But as civilization progressed and many more things came into play, it took shape. But in the last 200, 300 years, we can see the evolution of taverns, and Europe was still in fact, is the hub of good beer production. When beer was produced in very huge quantities, it was also being consumed in very huge numbers by many people. So the taverns and the pubs were full of beer drinkers. And when the number of beer drinkers increased and the gallons of beer they used to consume also increased, to serve beer became a little difficult. So when they thought that why don't we have a glass which has got a handle? Like this, you may be able to carry more of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Could be more. So you can carry 5 in one and 10. Carrying this on a tray or a salver would be very difficult. These are the small mugs. These are the pint-sized mugs. A pint size? What's a pint size? A pint is a measure which varies from place to place. The English pint is about 50 ml. The European pint is about 530 ml. The German pint is about 330 ml. So they accepted a 330 ml pinter, the German pinter, which is about 1/3 of a liter. So these mugs that you see today, very often found everywhere now, literally, takes in about 330 ml of beer, which is a pint, a German pint. And this is one handy piece of equipment and a very fancy piece of, but this is a mug. A bigger one is called a tankard, which can take, in Germany, they also use 1 liter ones, which are called tankard, which are thrice the size of this. And beer is served in this. The beer, as like champagne also has a lot of CO2 infused in it, and beer needs to be frothed. Most of the beer that will be served, you will see, will comes with the head, and they leave a space for the head. So if you measure it, it might take in about 350, 360 ml, because beer is filled until here. And the top half an inch that you see at the neck, at the top, the rim, is kept for the head. The head of the beer is very important. You know why? The head of the beer holds the rest of the CO2 and holds it below, so that the rest of the CO2 does not run away. You know, it's like drinking a flat Coke. Nobody would like a Coke or a soft drink without the CO2. So, God gave beer the head, actually the foam on top. So when you serve a glass of beer, especially in this, other ones I will talk about later, we create a foam, we create a froth, we create a head on top, so that the CO2, maximum CO2 could be retained inside the beer till the beer is consumed, because a flat beer is very close to being poisoned. Another glass which came into being was, since the whole of Europe was creating so much of beer, the whole of Europe was creating so much of beer that everybody wanted to make their beer look special. Since this was the most popular glassware used for serving beer, the Polynesian, the Polish, created their own beer, the Pilsner beer, which they stored in Polynesian caves. It was a top fermented beer and a lager beer, and it was served in these shaped style glasses, which later, or from that time, became known as the Pilsner glasses. From the place of Pilsner, the Pilsner beer, and from the Pilsner beer, the Pilsner glass. And this Pilsner glass, because of its nice shape, has become so popular that majority of the beer makers have somehow or the other copied this shape and created their glasses. So, Hogarden, a very popular beer, also has a glass, but little wider. Erdinger, another German beer, similar style of glass, but little wider. But this is a typical Pilsner glass. A typical Pilsner glass took a shape with a footed Pilsner. So this is a footed Pilsner where we created a foot, so that the glass could hold onto the table much more stronger and much more stabler than any other glass. But when beer got served along with a meal, the fancy goblet came into use. So if the beer was served on the table like a wine or water, it came in a goblet. The goblet had the stem, but the liquid that it holds is the same. Let's do a little bit of a thing. Let's pour a little water into this, or let me just pour a little bit of a stout beer into this. Let me pour a stout beer, a nice stout beer. This is about 330 ml, and this will take in the same quantity over here if I pour it. So the beer mug takes in the same, and let's see what it does to the beer goblet. Quite the same, enough place for the head goes into the footed Pilsner. So 4 glasses are different shape, but the sizes remain quite the same. Takes about a pint, a German pint of 330 ml, about 1/3 of a liter, and takes it nice and happy. So that's the story about the beer glasses. As whiskey was gaining popularity, another distilled spirit was equally gaining popularity in Europe. The area of Cognac and Armagnac in France were creating wonderful brandy from their wines. since the brandy that they were creating was unique and in very limited quantity, it became the choice of the noblemen of France. So, like we offer the best to our guests, the noblemen also started giving their best guest the best treat. So, a meal would end next to the fireplace with some brandy and a cigar. A good meal, especially a dinner at a noble house, will end with a splash, or maybe a little more than a splash, a shot of brandy in a glass along with a cigar with nice sofa. So they would pull their sofa, I'll use a chair over here, and a little of a brandy, light their fireplaces, sit cozily, cross legs and stretch their legs, and hold their brandy in their cups of their warm hands. And this warm hands next to the fireplace would leave and give away the nice effervescence of the wonderful brandy, the cognac and the armagnac, and they would roll and play as they will take the cigar from the ashtray and have a puff, come back and take a sip, sniff it nicely, take a sip, again hold it. They hardly used to keep it on the table. Just imagine a fireplace, wonderful couches, lovely ladies, great talk, great conversation, cigars to smoke on, and a lovely glass of brandy, the brandy balloon, or the brandy snifter. This is the snifter. Why the snifter? Because the aroma was so nice, it would sniff as similar to other glasses. The rim of the glass converges and you can sniff it nicely. So you move both inside and you can sniff it nicely. A brandy balloon, because it looks like a balloon, is blown up a bit, and they say that the measure is just good enough that one shot of brandy would not fall off even if it is tilted. Let me just try. Maybe a few drops would fall. No. A brandy balloon would take in exactly one shot and that would not spill. The brandy balloon has this little charisma that the brandy snifter gives its name. In the meantime, the bartenders were having a great time making their cocktails. So though they started making their cocktails in highball glasses and Tom Collins glasses, wonderful cocktail came into being, the martini. The martini became so popular that it being used as a social status. A martini glass or a cocktail glass, used even by the James Bond in his movies as vodka tea. The martini is being used instead of gin, that they are mixing vodka with some vermouth and creating a nice cocktail. Now these glasses have a very fanciful thing. They can hold only a small amount of cocktail. So these cocktails usually did not have more than two mixers. One would be a vermouth and one would be a distilled spirit. And they are not filled to the top. If you see, if I fill this glass to the top, I can actually make two drinks out of this glass. Let me show you how. Let me take another glass, a martini glass. I'll show you. I'll take this little bit of a white wine from here and pour it in here. And this much is the cocktail that is served. And if you think I can create another cocktail from this, this is quite the same. I would think that this would fit in inside this. Let me just put it here. One filled martini glass can actually create two martinis. So the bartenders made a lot of money. So the martini glass, also called the cocktail glass, is a conical glass with a little of an illusion. So actually, if people need a drink, they need it to the full. In fact, and if you see a full, you can actually create two similar looking cocktails in the same measure. The juice glass, one of the glasses which came into fashion later in part when juice became a part of an odour. Now, some of the classical odours has just got juice. The tomato juice is a classical cocktail. It's a classical odour. And juices were never ever in a fashion in a party. It was limited to a breakfast. And the juice glasses, when it became a fashion in the party circles, then it took the smaller size. Earlier, juices were served in either of these two glasses during breakfast, but when it was being served in a party later, the glasses were smaller, and these are called pony tumblers and also called juice glasses, predominantly used for serving juices in a function. This session will definitely not end because we have got innumerous glasses and it will continue. But in case if there are any questions that have come up, please let me know so that I can take before I finish up the session with my last piece of equipment in my hand. If there are no questions, please let me know. Even if there are questions, please let me know so that we can take those questions. Okay. I think we had enough number of glasses for this session. Brings us to the last piece, a decanter, a wine decanter. Wine has been decanted for long because wine has always been made by manual handling, and it has been transferred from one barrel to another barrel and one barrel. So most of the wines till today, majority of the red wines, leave a little sediment at the bottom. So these sediments need to be clarified. So this is a very old-fashioned wine pitcher or a wine decanter in which we used to pour the wines and leave it the wide base because most of the sediments will settle at the bottom, and then gradually it will be tilted. It will be tilted, so the sediments will slowly slide down and settle over here. And in the meantime, the cleaner wine would flow out from here and gradually fall in the glasses gradually. So what will happen is all the sediment that would have been collected here slowly will slide down and settle here, and cleaner wines will come. So the whole idea of having a broader base is to have the sediments stick to it. Most of the sediments will remain stuck on the base of the pitcher, and then whatever will slide till here. And if it slides and settles here, it won't come out if you have gradually pour the wine out of this decanter. Thank you so much for being with me, patiently going through my trivia sharing with you and my feelings. There's a lot more to know about these glasses, and there are a huge number of glasses that are being made every day with innovations, and every winemaker, every beer maker is creating his own glassware to support their beer sales and marketing, and also to promote their beers in very different ways. Winemakers are making their wine glasses, but these array of glasses remain quite traditional and quite popular till today. So these glasses will keep on changing, but what will remain constant is the history, the etymology, and the usage. Thank you so much for being with me. This is Sourabh signing off for today. Thank you so much. Bye-bye and take care. Thank you.